Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Natipa. So today we were going to the Bo-Kaap, and for the Bo-Kaap experience you have to walk. It is just like 10 minutes from where we were sleeping. So it is a walk, but you guys need a guide to help you through and explain to you things that are going on. So yeah. As we were walking, we were able to just have a nice view of the streets in Cape Town. So this street was called Long Street. Yeah, it's called Long Street. Yeah, and for you to cross the road here, you have to adhere to the rules, the traffic rules. Strictly. Honestly. Like it's not like the way we do it in our country. You just have to wait until you're told to go. Even pedestrians, yeah, they take it so serious, so you don't have to. I don't know this vehicle inawapatia so basically this is the way.
I know time imeisha saizi apanda huko
huku building zimeshikana, like it's like a long building imejengwa alafu zimeshikana kama hivyo.
Nikadala zote ya benefit anything.
Hakuna hata space like sijui walijenga aje. I don't know how they do it, but unapata tu they are being differentiated by colors only. But the building is literally the same structure, the same design. The only difference is the color. And it's like wanajenga a very long street alafu zimeshikana. I don't know how they do it, but that's how I observed. Unless tuambie. So we actually walked, and it was in the morning. So if you want to enjoy the best experience at Bo-Kaap, you need to go early in the morning to avoid crowding. Watu wanakujanga hapo, kunakuwa so crowded, you can't take a picture, you can't even enjoy the moment because that's
This is the first and the oldest mosque in South Africa, known as Our Masjid, meaning the first mosque. The mosque itself was founded around the late 1700s by one of the political prisoners that was taken all the way from Indonesia. Are you guys familiar with Robben Island? Yeah. Okay, but you guys know Robben Island because of the history of Mr. Nelson Mandela?
Yes.
So Robben Island has been in existence since way back. At some point it was a place that captured people with the leprosy disease. And again, during the times of slavery in the Cape, some of the political prisoners that were taken from other countries were arrested and captured in Robben Island. So amongst those political prisoners were the 4 imams that were taken all the way from Indonesia. They were arrested from their homelands because they refused the Dutch colonial rule, okay? And amongst those 4 imams was a prince also. So this 4th imam was not just an imam, but he was also a prince. He was arrested and captured in Robben Island for good 13 years. Now, while he was in Robben Island, he continued to fight for his homelands because they refused the Dutch colonial rule in their homelands. But what he did the most while he was sitting in Robben Island, he spent time writing a few copies of the Quran from memory. If I look at the history of the man, I've been doing my research, this is almost the same history as Mr. Nelson Mandela. When Nelson Mandela was arrested in South Africa and captured in Robben Island, that was because he was fighting for the freedom of the people of South Africa. But guess what? He also had love for education. While he was arrested in Robben Island, he continued to fight for the people of South Africa, but also what he did was to also educate himself. So when finally this same imam was released after good 13 years, he was now a freed slave. So what happened in the Cape is that when the Dutch came in here, to build a refreshment station around the 1600s, they came across people in the Cape. And those were the indigenous people that were known as the Khoi and the San. Those were the first people that were in the Cape. When the Dutch came in here, hoping to build the refreshment station, the company that Jan van Riebeeck came with, under the Dutch East Indian Company, expected the same people that were found in the Cape to work under Jan van Riebeeck. Okay. So there has been wars between the Khoi, the San, and the Dutch that led to many deaths of some of the people that came with Jan van Riebeeck, and of course some of the Khoi and the San. At the end of the wars, all those people were no longer enough to even do anything in the Cape. That is why the Dutch East Indian Company started introducing slaves into the Cape. So they started bringing in slaves from all these other trading posts that they've been trading from Indonesia, Malabar, Madagascar, Sri Lanka, Ceylon, Mozambique, and some of the East and West African countries. They took all those slaves and they brought them into the Cape. Those were the people who were enslaved to work into the Cape, and they all belonged to that same company, which was the Dutch East Indian Company. In order for you to be a freed slave, you needed to have bought your freedom, meaning buying your freedom. It's either you're working for a personal slave master, so meaning you won't be captured in the same house as the rest of the slaves that were brought into the Cape, but you were given maybe a place to stay, or maybe stay with that personal slave master that has bought you, or whatever it is. But if you work, you are no longer a slave for the Dutch East Indian Company, you are a personal slave. Now, during those times of slavery, there was a man that came all the way from Amsterdam. He came here in the Cape because he wanted to be involved in the wine industry. So he wanted to farm for wine and was given this very same portion of land that we're standing in. So he started farming, but the soil in this area didn't allow him to do so. So what he did, instead of letting the land go just like that, he came up with an idea of building rental houses, because there were many other freed slaves that would have needed a place to stay. So Jan de Waal, what he did, he started building rental houses in this area, all of them, same color, same size, same architecture. The aim of these houses was for some of the freed slaves, while of course working for their personal masters, but still they would still pay rent, meaning paying back to the Dutch East Indian Company. Okay. But what happened now was that from the mid-1600s up until the early 1800s, the British decided to come in to abolish slavery. It wasn't about abolishing slavery, but because the company itself, the Dutch East Indian Company, went under so much corruption in the Cape that they couldn't take care of the Cape anymore. So a decision was made by the headquarters of the Dutch East Indian Company to rather let the English take over. Because of course, between the French, the British and the Dutch, there has been that thing of fighting over territories, taking over, and this trade route was one of the routes all the way from Asia to Europe, a route that needed to be taken care of and protected. So which is why the British came in around the 1800s. What they did, they abolished slavery in 1830. They freed all the slaves in 1830. So this area that we're standing in is one of the first areas where all the freed slaves moved into. Okay. So they didn't move in here only because there were free houses. Why these houses ended up being free? Because that same man that built houses in this area, later when the British came in to abolish slavery, the Dutch East Indian Company, they didn't stay in the Cape. They had to leave. So they left the Cape under the hands of the British. Therefore, these houses were declared free and had no owner. Okay. So majority of the slaves moved in here because they were empty houses. But guess what? The same political prisoner, the same prince and imam who was arrested for 13 good years, he was one of the freed slaves that was freed even before the rest of the people moved into the Bo-Kaap. So when the people arrived here around 1830, he was already here as a freed slave. When he arrived in this area, he immediately turned his house into a praying mosque, because he was not just an imam, but he was also a prince and he was free. Yeah. So majority of the people moved in here because they saw a mosque. They were no longer slaves. They were free to practice their religion. Okay. Now, he played a very huge role into turning this area into what it is today, because majority of the slaves, when they were brought in here, they were brought in as property, meaning they were not allowed to practice their religion. Okay. So by the time they were freed, they had already lost themselves and faith in terms of religion. They didn't even attempt to practice their religion. But he knew that all these slaves were religious. Now he used the very same Qurans that he wrote in Robben Island to help spread the word of Islam, try and let people regain their faith in terms of the religion itself. And he managed to convert some of the people as well, and that gave right to the rest of the imams to come into this area to help the man himself, turning this area into a 100% Muslim area.
Oh, it's 100% Muslim?
Yes, sir. Why? Because once they were freed by the British also gave them right to freedom of religion. So that gave them right to build as many mosques as they want, because they were no longer slaves now. Okay. But now, of course, the imams make sure that everybody that is in this area is practicing the same religion. They rather made a decision of chasing out everyone that wasn't practicing the religion. Meaning, if you were not Muslim, if you were non-religious, you were forcefully moved out of this place. And of course, the rest of the other slaves didn't just move into the Bo-Kaap, but from here, 16 minutes away towards this direction, there is another area, also old just like the Bo-Kaap, known as the District 6. That is where majority of the slaves moved to. Okay, there you could be religious, you could be non-religious, you could be any religion. It didn't matter. That area later became a multiracial and a multi-religious area. Okay, this is why this area was rather declared as a 100% Muslim area. So before it was known as the Bo-Kaap, it was then known as the Malay quarters. Why again? Because majority of the slaves that moved in here were mostly Indonesian and Malaysian. Okay, so just like slavery was passed from generations to generations, these same houses were also passed from generations to generations. And of course, came around the 1900s in South Africa, the times of apartheid. All over South Africa, people were segregated according to their races and according to their skin colors. Places like the District 6, where the rest of the people were moved to for not wanting to practice this religion, they were later, according to the Group Areas Act of South Africa, they were moved according to their races and according to their skin colors in different parts of the Cape. Okay. Therefore, later, that area, the District 6, was later destroyed and demolished. So we no longer have the area as one of the standing neighborhoods. As for this area, because they were given freedom of religion, during the times of apartheid, they didn't demolish the area. But what they did was to isolate the area again. By isolating the area, again moving out everybody that wasn't part of the Malay and Indonesian descendants of the slaves. If you were Chinese, if you were African or Indian, you were forcefully moved out of this area. It was known as strictly the Malay quarters. Right. Again, after the apartheid, of course, the area was gentrified, and so the rest of the Cape and South Africa as well. Now, the name of this area changed because people felt like this area didn't just need to be only for Muslims, didn't need to be only for the Malay descendants and all that. So, of course, the new council of this area was elected, and people had rights to come and purchase houses into this area, run businesses, and all that. So today, we're no longer looking at this area as a 100% Muslim area, but about 60 or 63% of the people that stay here, they are still Muslim. Okay. But till today, this area still highly maintains the Muslim culture. You can't find any churches. There are no churches or any temples for any other religions. We still highly have a number of mosques in this area, and there are rules as per the Muslim religion in this area. Okay. Like there's no noise allowed. There's no alcohol allowed. There's so many things that are not allowed, that are not, of course, accommodating the Muslim religion in this area. And everybody that stays in this place has to abide by those rules. Any questions? Okay. So what makes this mosque very special is that the oldest Quran, one of the oldest Qurans that was written by this Imam and the Prince, is today captured and still found inside the mosque. Why? Because he wrote Qurans out of memory, they decided to bring in the actual Quran to compare if the one he wrote was accurate. They did find a few errors, of course, because it was written from memory, but it was accurate, which is why they've kept it inside the mosque. And of course, all these mosques in this area, they still operate. In total, there are 6 mosques in this area. This is the first one. And of course, when we were making our way to this block in the middle, there's another gray one. I don't know if you guys have noticed. The other third mosque is further up, I'll show you, and the other 3 is on the other side. Because this area is also not So by the time it was around the 1900s, these houses were way too old because a certain type of material was used in the first place to build these houses. The type of material that they used to build these houses originally was sun-baked brick. Those are the material or type of course, stones that were made by the slaves. Meaning you hand make the brick and leave it to be dried by the sun, and that's what you use to build the house. So they were way too old. Some of them were demolished and started from scratch. Some of them were reconstructed, while we still have some of them on their original state, because some of them are some heritage sites because they mark history. Something happened with the house, which is why they still decide to keep them on their original state. But when it comes to these houses, right after the slaves were freed, these houses were made official and they were given to their original owners. So whoever that stayed in the house ended up owning the house, and of course they were passed from generations to generations. Now this gave them a right to do whatever it is that they want because it's their houses. They decided though to put life into this area because remember they came here as slaves. They had no right, they were treated as property. They didn't have a right to own anything. They ended up owning these houses, and what they did was to try and leave the history behind, which was the Dao history. They've decided to paint these houses into colorful houses. Yes, it was a sign of freedom because they were no longer slaves, and secondly, they painted these houses colorfully as a sign of diversity. These were slaves or people that were taken from all over who didn't know each other but ended up together, started the same culture, ending up with the same heritage. Okay. So when it comes to the colors, pink doesn't mean anything, yellow doesn't mean anything. It's just colors being colorful. Okay. And of course, like I said, they belong to their original owners. It means you can paint your house whenever you want. You can paint it every year or every season or every after 10 years. It's not a must to paint your house every time. It's totally your house. But what happened is when this area was gentrified, some of the people turned these houses into business sectors. Airbnbs, guest houses. So majority of them are leasing their properties, while some of the properties have been sold. So depending on how you take care of your property, it's depending on what's going on inside. We still have a lot of residential houses here, people still staying in these houses because at the end of the day, it is still a neighborhood. Okay. So as you can see, we've been walking and all these houses are joined together. There isn't really a house that is standing on its own because that is how they were built originally. Okay. And also, this also means that they can't extend their houses if they want to make them much more bigger because of how they were originally built. The only space that they have if they want to make their houses bigger is when they elevate their houses into being double-story houses. So like you see, we've been walking all of them. It's the same design, double story, double story. Okay. If you see a house like that pink one, a house that's bigger than the other, that they will be either the person brought the property next door or maybe two families that joined houses together. But as you can see, these houses are almost the same size and the same structure as well. Okay. So anybody can paint the color of their choice. They depend. Some majority of them, they change these colors according to the season. If it's gonna be raining and windy and cold, then they put darker colors because obviously the wind, the rain will be taking off the paint. But when it's summer or fall, then they paint brighter colors. Okay. So as one of the original still standing neighborhoods in the Cape, this area has rather been marked as a heritage site. It is very famous, known all across the world. Everybody that is visiting Cape Town will want to end up in this area. So they are aware of that, which is why they know how to play with paint. Okay, so every time they paint beautiful colors, they know how to play with paint. And of course, as much as it's their houses, but they make sure that the colors, they always come together, you know? You can't really find a darker color next to a bright color. What they do is they've decided to make it a nice tradition.
Saizi wewe ukienda French class, unaweza kuwa number 1.
Aishindwe.
I swear, let me tell you.
Umeenda kuchange wapi?
Hapo tu nyuma, like hakuna washroom, nenda tu nyuma hapo nyuma. Like kunatoa tu hiyo kitu, unatoa tu hapa, alafu na sasa ushavaa hii, alafu sasa tunateremsha na huko chini. Bagi hivyo tu like simple. Na huko ana story kuvaa bra nini.